but there are still these mental barriers or bottlenecks in their business that they're kind of afraid to take the next step on. So it's kind of different for each person. It could be maybe platforms they don't want to spend the time to be on, but they know they should be on. Like maybe they should really be on Instagram and put together a short form video strategy and use ManyChat and do things to scale their business there, but they really don't want to, or they're afraid to. Or it could be they really need to hand off a part of their business that they used to do, but maybe they shouldn't be doing anymore. So like for me, for example, that would be like, I probably shouldn't be editing my own videos anymore, but I know how to do it. I did it for 10 years. Like, why would I want to hand this off? So it's like the things that people are used to doing, but they probably shouldn't be doing. Those are the typical levers you try to come in and.
What is the next right system that's holding you back from scaling your business? I have one of the world's best experts to answer that question with me today, and someone who I really admire, someone I've gotten to know really well recently, who I feel like I've known for a long time. His name's Caleb Wojcik, and Caleb and I actually encountered each other last year at Craft and Commerce in Boise, Idaho, very quickly after a dinner, and it led to a follow-up text, which led to a conversation, which has led to a burgeoning friendship, and someone I really respect and have gotten to know on a much more personal basis. So, Caleb, I know we have a ton to unpack. You have an amazing story. You have a lot to teach us. So I want to kind of get us going, hand the mic over to you, and like just give us a taste of your entrepreneurial story, and then we'll double tap into the places that we need to give the audience more value.
Sounds good. Yeah, I think, going all the way back to when I was a kid, my dad was an entrepreneur. He played music. He was a photographer. We lived in northern Michigan, which is very seasonal. It's nice in the summer and tourists come up, and then the winter, there's like nothing. So he had like different businesses where he played music in the summer and do photography in the winter. And honestly, I saw the ups and downs of that, and I didn't really want to be an entrepreneur. This is early internet days. There is not social media. And I just saw the ups and downs of busy seasons and financial, turmoil of being an entrepreneur in the services business like he was. And so I went to college and basically worked hard to have a perfect resume where I would get a traditional job at a Fortune 100 company and could, ride it out until, retirement and that sort of thing. But I graduated in 2008. And within a couple months of graduating college, there was a global recession, essentially. And so my first job out of college was at the Boeing company. And I worked in finance, and I had spreadsheets that were literally every department at the factory I worked at having to reduce headcount in like the next few months because Boeing was laying off like 10 or 15,000 people across the company. And immediately it was like what I thought was going to be the plan for me. I was like, oh, these companies actually don't take care of you the way that I thought they did. At any moment, someone at the top can just be like, we need to reduce 7% of the company, and they'll just have to go figure it out. So that kind of kickstarted me into like, oh, I need to start learning how to be an entrepreneur. I like swung all the way back to the other side of things. Started reading books about it, 4-hour work week, a bunch of personal finance and entrepreneurship blogs at the time were popular. Podcasts were, just kind of getting started. And that was where I first heard of Pat Flynn of Smart Passive Income. And I listened to an episode of his podcast that Corbett Barr was on, who ran a website called Think Traffic. And, fast forward a few months later, I bought a product from Corbett. Fast forward another like 9 months, I left my job at Boeing to go work for him full time. So I quit my corporate job with benefits and everything to go work for a blogger, essentially in 2011, which was definitely a risk. I waited till like my student loans were paid off. I got my MBA while I was at Boeing, and they paid for 75% of it. And this is like a risk I took right when I got married. So my wife was on board with it and everything. But looking back, my parents were probably like, what are you doing?
That's awesome.
So
Well, I just want to say,
spent a few years there and kind of learn from someone doing it full time.
That's cool. I think you're the first person I've ever interviewed who pointed to their parent who was a creative entrepreneur, like he was a musician and a photographer. And then they're like, I don't want to do that. That's actually really refreshing because most of us and most of the people I interview are like, had the 9 to 5, corporate and golden handcuffs. I wanted to go like strike out on my own. Or they ran a shop. It was fun. I worked there my whole childhood, and I knew I wanted to follow in those footsteps. It's really fun to kind of hear that in the seasonal northern Michigan environment, you're kind of like, I don't want my dad's existence. And so you go take the quote unquote safe path, get out of college in a financial crisis, and your first job is basically doing all the math to lay off, 10,000, 15,000 people from a company that everyone thought they were going to retire from.
Yeah.
And so, we have a lot of commonalities. I don't need to hit on all of them, but obviously, we just had an interview with Pat go live on this podcast. And I encountered him about the same time you did. And then with the thing you did with Corbett, was that Fizzle or did that become Fizzle.co?
It became Fizzle, yeah. So at the time, he had a website called Think Traffic, and then we started another one called Expert Enough. Then we brought on Chase Reeves as a part of the team, and eventually launched Fizzle, which was a online entrepreneurial membership. It had courses, forums, things like that. It was pretty kind of early for that model. Now, it's a very similar model we have now at Smart
Yep.
Passive Income, where you pay, membership access to get the library of courses and exclusive, access to other people. So yeah, that's what that eventually became in 2013.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, because I was a fizzler as they were called, and I listened to the podcast, and I had a lot of fond memories of those guys, and you kind of got to know you, even though you didn't know me. That whole dynamic of being known when someone doesn't know you. All right, so that's kind of gets you up to 2013. So now you're a full time entrepreneur, young, married. Wife was supportive of this, but you had kind of given up the corporate identity and moved over into entrepreneurship with some partners, right? So it sounds like it's a partnership. So yeah, take us. We don't have to go through every year in chronological order, but I know there's a chapter here where you're like full-time videography business, and then obviously we'll get into SwitchPod and the role that you have at SBI today. But yeah, just kind of bridge that gap, and we'll spend most of our time talking about today and moving forward with all the things that you've learned and all the things you have to teach.
Yeah. So by 2014 or so, I had developed a lot of video production skills when I was working with Corbett. And at Fizzle, we put a lot of energy and effort into high quality courses, high quality interviews with entrepreneurs. And I really kind of dove into learning how to do that. It was much harder back then tool wise, like cameras didn't even autofocus on faces, and things are more expensive, and phones weren't at the quality that they are today. And I felt like I loved that part enough that that was all I really wanted to do. And so I left working with Corbett in the fall of 2014, start up a video production company, and I started to work with a lot of the entrepreneurs and startups in the what we now call the creator economy. Back then, it wasn't called that, but just a lot of online entrepreneurs, bloggers, people that were wanting to make courses, launch videos. They were having conferences, in person stuff, and so that was my bread and butter for a good 10 years. Was working with authors on courses, people teaching things. I did videos on everything from watercolor painting and like authors doing books to like teaching podcasting or personal finance or whatever else. So I did about 2 million in revenue with my camera, essentially, of like client projects over that 10-year period. But I had small team from time to time. I'd have multiple people show up to film. Had an editor almost full time for 7 or 8 of those years as well. And I would do digital products on the side of my own. I would review camera gear that I would get. I would teach people how to edit in Premiere Pro. And so I was balancing this client work, and I was doing a digital business kind of concurrently for that time frame. And then about halfway through that 10 years, Pat and I were at a video conference and came up with the idea for SwitchPod, which is a tripod that is handheld and collapses on itself. And so that was another like 5-6 year journey over the past as well, of launching that on Kickstarter and going to China, the factories, and handling, fulfillment and making new products and things like that. So I've kind of had my hands in client business, digital business with more like affiliate and ad and course revenue, and doing physical products.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so cool about your story and what gives you such perspective to answer that opening question about like what's the right next step or the right next system for the listener to scale. Because you've had a corporate job, you've had a partnership with Fizzle, you've had your own videography business, and then on the side of that, you're doing sort of the digital affiliate YouTube review thing, and now you've got a physical product. Which, as someone who's had a physical product, it's a whole different bear. It's a whole different world. And then so that's SwitchPod. So just to spend a minute on that, because that's unique. Like most people don't have a physical product. Kind of like, how's that doing today? Pat talked a little bit about the Kickstarter campaign and the figuring out how to get this thing built. It's still a thing, and then you and him are still partners in it, right?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. So we kickstarted it at the beginning of 2019, and then honestly, due to COVID and stuff, we had strong 2020 and 2021 because a lot of people had additional money to, invest in their home, recording setups and, virtual meetings and, YouTube and everything else. And then it kind of tapered off after that, essentially. But I think Pat and I have both come to the understanding that like we don't want to be solely physical product
Yeah.
business owners and development. And we've learned the gamble and the risk that doing that entails, essentially, of placing big orders, having unforeseen things like tariffs
Yeah.
that impact your business heavily. Like before we got one of our first big shipments, there was an original round of tariffs, in the first Trump
Yeah.
administration. So not to like get too political, but there's like
Oh yeah.
stuff out of your control where the stuff is literally already on the boat heading over from another country, and something out of your control politically makes it
When
cost
it gets
more,
here.
cuts into
Yeah.
your margins. Yeah. And so having done digital businesses with higher profit margins and client businesses with higher profit margins, the physical business is
Yeah.
just different. It's just a different kind of scale needed to be as profitable.
Has that always
And
been a
it's
direct
just
to consumer
riskier with,
business, or have you guys ever gotten into the whole retail wholesale model?
we've done retail as well. We are on a few online retailers, like camera
Okay.
ones related to it, like B&H and places like that. But, we tried to go down to through the brick and mortar as well, but we were timing it right when COVID, where a lot of them
Yeah.
tightened up. So, like we were in Best Buy, then we're out of Best Buy, but like you couldn't even shop in a Best
Yeah.
Buy at the time. So it was like, there's just different, timing things that are involved with that
Totally
as well.
understand. Yeah. I mean, people that haven't experienced this would have a really hard time appreciating it. Like as someone who sold meat sticks in the time when there was a beef shortage, it's like, I don't control the beef shortage. I don't control all this weird stuff. And I have a client right now
Yeah.
who does like, she's in the like gift industry and like trained sales reps for trade shows. Well, I mean, completely annihilated with the tariff situation, right? She's like the third
Yeah.
order effect from it, but she's losing consulting contracts with companies who can no longer pay her because they have to pay 140% for something that left the port
Yeah.
10 days ago.
Yeah.
So anyway, we won't have to go down that. But I think kind of like you entered your professional career in 2008, you got like all this uncertainty in the financial crisis, and that just is like always going to happen, right? Like there's always something, and you may or may not be affected by it. I think in a physical product business, you're more likely to be affected by it, right? Than in a information or a coaching type of business that we mostly focus on. But really important out of that chapter is obviously you created a really even tighter relationship with Pat, and has led you. And I don't want to skip any steps, so feel free to fill in the gaps. But I know as of basically a year ago, you came on board at SPI as a full-time team member, and now you're the CEO of SPI, aka Smart Passive Income. So feel free to fill in any gaps there, but otherwise we can kind of lean into what's that like, and what's that about right now, being the CEO of SPI.
Yeah. I mean, right when we launched on Kickstarter for SwitchPod, I believe it was January 27th or 29th in 2019. 2 days later, my wife found out she's pregnant. And then about, roughly 9 months later, we had a kid. And about a week or two after that, we shipped all the initial orders of SwitchPod. So it's like the like SwitchPod has a
The
birth story as well as
gestation
my first
period.
child as well. Yeah. And then, 4 or 5 months later, COVID hit, everything shut down. My wife and I wanted 2 kids, so we decided to have another. Turns out that was twins. And so within a span of, a year and a half, basically, we went from no kids to 3 kids. And that definitely put things into perspective a bit more. And what my video production work looked like a lot of the time was packing up a lot of gear and equipment, flying somewhere, either in the US or around the world, and being gone for 4 or 5 days
Yeah.
at a time. During like my height, I was gone anywhere from 40 to 50 nights a
Wow.
year doing projects. So, that's 10-ish trips away. And so I just didn't really want to honestly do that anymore. As well as the landscape changed where just tools became easier to use on your own. So people were filming stuff on their own a bit more coming out of COVID, especially. And every year there's another generation of kids that will, that are seeing other people ahead of them being like, oh, I can do this as a career. I can charge less. I can, so it got more and more competitive and
Yep.
easier to do. And so I essentially wanted to just step back from video production in the long term. So that's where I shifted into this role at SPI. Honestly, I was just having a conversation with Matt and Pat over there about what I wanted to do, and they're like, "Interesting. We're looking for someone that wants to help lead the company." So it kind of just timed out that it
No
worked like that.
coincidences, I always say. So yeah. So just give us a snapshot, like kind of what's the role at SPI. So you've been there a year. I know you've been the CEO like 9 months, something like that. And in an official capacity. So yeah, tell us what that's like, and then we'll talk about life in and even more so life outside of SPI and some of the other work that you're doing. And then we'll use that as sort of the foundation to instruct the audience on some of the lessons that you've learned and how they can apply that to scale their own businesses. But yeah, what's your role like at SPI today?
Yeah, I mean, if Pat was just on recently and you guys listen to that one, you know a bit about smart passive income, but his business also went through multiple stages where, you know, he was doing it all on his own. You know, when the blog first started, and the podcast, and he started to build up a group of contractors. Then at some point, he decided to, you know, join forces with Matt Gartland's company and have like a team of people, like a group of full-time people on staff and helping with things. And that's essentially where it's at now, where, you know, including Matt and Pat and myself, we're at around 9 people full time that work on it. Half is on the marketing side, half is on the community
Okay.
side, because we have a community of entrepreneurs that people pay for monthly to access. And there's various content we're putting out all the time, you know, YouTube videos, podcasts, newsletters, social posts, all kinds of things, and continually making courses to train people in the community, having events in there, partnering with sponsors. And there's a lot of different activities that go into a personal brand creator business that I help run the day-to-day
Love
of.
that. And so I would just selfishly love to hear sort of you guys. I actually have had Matt on this Matt Gartland on this podcast as well. So we have Matt, Pat, and Caleb, and actually now all three have been here. But you're in a unique perspective because you came into this. It's not, you know, it's the Pat Flynn show for so many years, right? And then Matt's sort of the behind the scenes connection, but he's more of the team guy. You're coming in with, I think, a even different perspective, and you've been there like a year fully entrenched and now leading the new vision, right? And I think that's a really interesting thing because now you're becoming the captain and you're leading this ship that's got two really smart people, but now you're at the helm. Like, where do you see the future of SPI? And what I mean by that is, like, you mentioned community, you mentioned different forms of content. You know, Pat's still writing books and all the things we talked about when he was on here. But like, you've seen so many evolutions of the economy and like physical products and, you know, all this stuff. But like, when you think about SPI in 5 years, is it like community first? Are courses still a thing? Does there need to be high touch coaching because that's what matters? Like, what do you think matters in this creator economy when we look 3 to 5 years out with AI and all the things that we're facing right now?
Right. Yeah. I mean, AI is definitely a big part of it. I know what Pat would say is like information is more available than ever. And that's, you know, part of why he wrote Lean Learning, but is like to not get overwhelmed by it. And so I feel like there is still value in teaching. There is still value in courses. If you can take someone along a journey from a start to finish, get them through a transformation, people are still going to be willing to pay for that. And they're going to be willing to pay for it from a specific person that's maybe done it before, you know, can prove that they are an expert on this thing. But on the flip side of that is like, yeah, you need to know anything, you could probably find it out there. It's still been like that even before AI became a thing. You can still Google stuff. You can still search and find whatever you wanted to learn how to do. It's about packaging it. It's about, you know, can they go from A to B faster? Can you save them time? Can you share your particular insight on that thing that worked for you? I think the personalization is going to be a big part of what makes brands survive, is having personality behind them and not just information behind them. You know, any sort of brand that's almost faceless and driven on SEO and those types of things, I think are just kind of going to go away, because you're going to have AI summaries that they're just pulling from those websites. No one's ever going to land on your website, buy whatever things, or click your affiliate links. So I think the stronger brands are going to have actual people in front of them. And to me, what the most interesting thing is how do you stand out among the people that are also going to be quote unquote faceless and use AI avatars to pretend like they're a person. So I think there's going to be this mini revolution of people going back to incredibly raw and personal things about them so that someone can tell that they're not AI. There's already been examples of, you know, like Instagram influencers and YouTubers and stuff that people thought were real that weren't. Like I remember there was like a female motorcyclist or something in Asia that had like a big following, but it like turned out it was just like this older dude.
Older
And
creepy
he just
guy. Yeah.
like he would drive to the spot and take the photo and like AI replace or whatever. And so it's like you're gonna have this whole wave of
Yeah.
fake. You just get this huge wave of fake. But I do think anyone that's probably doing that is just trying to find a shortcut and is not in it for the long haul. And those will just like flare up and kind of go away. And it's going to be you picking something and sticking with it long enough. And so I know people that are purposely leaving in typos, leaving in mistakes in their Instagram reels and stuff like so it does not seem like
Yep.
it's AI. And that's just it's just a unique kind of thing that's happening because of how easy it is to
Yeah.
fake stuff now.
That's interesting. You said packaging, and I get that. It's the first time in my life I made this connection as you were describing it. You said personalization, which my brain's always defaulted. Like personalization means that if Caleb has content, it's personalized to me as the recipient, meaning like it's personalized to me, like it's custom content to Dustin, it's curated to Dustin. But the way that you framed it was actually personalized, meaning it's got Caleb's personality in it. So a leader's personality is imbued in the experience and the content and the insights. So that for some reason, when people say personalized content, I've always just thought of like the recipient it being custom, but not that like keeping the personality of the creator in it. And I think both those are important, but the personality of the creator is really important. I like what you said about all that. And then the last question, and then we'll get over into the other projects that you're involved in. How does community fit in? It seems to me as an observer at SPI and someone who's going to do some guest training in a couple of your communities, that this has become at least the forward-facing focus of SPI as the monetization model. But like, you think community is like the big hedge against AI? Are you guys really leveraging community as like a primary part of your product portfolio, to use all the P's I can think of?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what Pat and Matt learned with SPI over the years is they made a lot of courses. I helped film and
Yeah.
edit a lot of them over the years, and they could be profitable for the business, but you find completion percentages are fairly low of people that go through it, actually do the work that's in it. And so what we do now with our accelerators inside the SPI community is essentially break it into week by week chunks. People go through it in a cohort together. The completion rates are 4 or 5 times
Yep.
higher because people have more accountability to get it done. And you see that with, I'm sure, like having a partner to go to the gym with or whatever else it is. Like accountability is a big part of it, as well as getting feedback along the way. So, I hop on calls occasionally, for the podcasting or YouTube course, and people give their podcast artwork or thumbnails, and we talk about them and we give feedback on them, and they post in the community and they get insight and stuff. And I feel like that personal connection is something people are willing to pay for. They're willing to pay for being in the right room with the right people that know how to think about stuff versus taking it to their friend or their spouse or whoever that's not like in the day to day of knowing what works. And I think that people are willing to pay for advice and feedback and accountability, and those are all things that community can do.
I like that a lot. In my own experience, like everything we do is based in a community. Our flagship program, the podcast profits accelerators, cohort based. I've had a lot of pushback, I guess maybe I don't know if that's the right word, but I've had a lot of advice from people that, hey, you can't scale cohorts, and I've resisted that because I'm like, no, I see the magic in the cohorts. Right? We've done 14 of these cohorts. Now, is cohorts the only way to drive value? No, but I think it ain't broke. Like, I don't want to fix it. It's like, this is really working, and the things you said are totally part of that, like the accountability, the structure, the insights from the leader, like they get Caleb or they get Pat or whatever, like direct insights, like that's all good. And then the two things that come up a lot for us, I'm sure you guys get this, especially in your like thrive level of your community, is clarity and connection, right? And it's people like, I didn't really want to be in a group, and I didn't think I needed a group, and I don't need any more Zoom calls in my life. But oh my gosh, I've got so much clarity, from the other people in this group. Like they've provided me this kind of 360 feedback that I could have never got anywhere else. And of course, connection. Like I've got friends in here. People really understand what I'm going through. Someone referred me to a client or, a podcast opportunity in our case. And so I'm viewing this, and it feels like you guys are too at SPI, like I don't know, who knows what AI is going to do to my business in a year or 3 years, but I think community is my best hedge. I think it's like the best way to actually serve the people now. And it's the best hedge against AIification of all my stuff. It's like, you can go right now really into chat GPT and have Dustin write your podcast pitch and do the more mechanical things, but you can't yet replace what it's like to be in a group of 200 other people who think and share your values and care about you and collaborate with you and hold you accountable. And so I love, in other
Yeah.
words, that you guys are using community as like a primary part of your value. And I'm doing the same. And I think that's going to be good as we get into the more AI stuff and the fakery and all the things we talked about. So any closing thoughts on that? And we'll move on to another topic.
Yeah, I mean, I think we saw it. I feel like we keep bringing
Yeah.
up COVID, but we saw it during that time frame where people seek the human connection when everyone was supposed to
Yep.
stay home, and they found a way to connect with other people. And we did see cohort-based stuff take off a lot. A lot of our peers, as well as the SBI community, was kind of launching in COVID to help, you know, foster that request from people in the audience of like, we want to get connected to people that are at our level, so we can have certain conversations that we can't just have
Yeah.
publicly on Reddit or Twitter or Instagram or wherever else. So it's the equivalent of whatever would have been your local village or your local like college campus or whatever, but now it's
Yep.
just online. And I think that in the age of AI, people are going to crave that even
Yep.
more, because when I go to scroll social media and everything is, I can tell AI created and feels like soulless, or not a person. Have you heard the dead internet theory?
No.
That nothing on the internet is even real anymore. It's just AIs and robots reposting the other things. That's like, eventually that's the point we'll get to, where there'll be no original thought and everything will just be regurgitated by
Yeah.
AI to each other, and the AI will start talking to each other, and it'll just
Yeah, I mean that's just, it
So
does feel like there's shades of that already, and then I always like to think like, hey, in that reality, what am I really going to want to do? I'm going to want to go like literally stand around a campfire with other humans and tell stories and, share a favorite beverage or whatever. It's like, yeah, it's like how we did before we had the internet. It's like that is a primal
yeah.
thing that we want. We like tribe, we're tribal and we want to like be around people and, have each other's back and all that. And I hope that there's still a great place to do that virtually, and it'll get even better, with AI being a positive add to that. And but no, the dead internet thing, that's a thought I did need today. So thanks, Caleb, for ruining the internet.
You're welcome. Yeah. I mean, I feel like parts of the internet are
Yes,
already there. Even
yes,
like Twitter replies and LinkedIn
yes.
comments. It's
LinkedIn.
like someone hit the AI generate send, and they did that 20 times, and that's their engagement. And so
Yes, for sure. All right. So
we're already
I think we've
close.
got to extract a lot of value there on like what SPI is doing, what your role is there, your perspective through all your entrepreneurial journey. We haven't really talked yet about what you do outside of SPI, because one of the cool things about SPI, Matt has his own projects, Pat has his own projects, Caleb has his own projects and businesses and things like that. And I know in being there a year, this has been a fertile time for you to kind of like try out some new things and have some new constraints on your time, but also some new opportunities and access and freedoms. So let you put in your own words between what you and what your wife are up to. Like, what we know the entrepreneur Caleb of your role as a CEO at SPI, but like what's the entrepreneur Caleb still doing today outside of those times?
Yeah, a lot of who I've serviced like as a video production company over the past 10 years are people at a certain level in their business, and I targeted people that could afford, a 5-figure
Yeah.
video project for me to fly out, film with them for a few days to record something that they would sell and make even more money off of. And so essentially what I'm doing now is, on the side of SPI, is working with people at that level in the like mid to 6-figure, low 7-figure range, that are looking to either scale beyond themselves. Maybe they have like a handful of contractors, or they've started to hire some teams, but there's, systems or missing pieces essentially in their business. And I essentially come in like a mechanic to determine what parts of their businesses are weak or could be fixed, and figuring out what those systems are that we can make better. So typically someone's either really good at content creation or marketing, and that's why they're able to grow an audience or grow a business, but they might not be so good on, you know, building a team or operations, or their finances might be a mess, or whatever it is. There might be leaky parts of their funnel that they're not really seeing. And those are the things that I can come in and kind of assess, and then kind of like an architect, kind of put a blueprint together for like, okay, this is what this part of your business should
Yep.
look like. And so it's helping creators that kind of reach a plateau or a scale issue where they either want to scale beyond themselves a bit more or scale their revenue uh, higher than they've been
That's
able to.
awesome. And I know there's definitely people listening to this that are experiencing it now, or will experience it because you become a victim of your own success in a positive way. I've experienced it. In some ways, I'm experiencing it now. And so, first of all, I love that that emphasis because again, with you have a very unique perspective. Like you've been in all these different business types. You've got one of the, I think the huge advantages you have as the CEO of SPI is not only the paycheck that comes with it, but like the access you have to see all the other creators, right? Like you're the creator serving creators, and therefore you see the spectrum of people who are experiencing scale opportunities and pains in different ways. So if someone's sitting here, I know we're going to talk about how they can have your personal brain on their business to do this, but just in a more general sense, are there like a list of levers? I'm kind of picturing an analogy, like a car, you mentioned that, or an airplane or something. Are there like, these are the 5 key things, one of these is screwed up and you need to fix? Like, are there like key categories that everyone has to address when they're scaling a business, let's say from 6 figures to 7 figures?
I think that in general, people know the thing that isn't working
Yeah.
in their business. There's a mixture of like, I feel like I'm really good at something, and then I feel like I'm really bad at something. So I'm going to outsource the bad things like accounting or legal or, finances or handling my email or whatever, like the things that people really don't like doing, they're quick
Yep.
to hand off. It's the things that they're mediocre at that they're afraid to hand off that are the things that are the
Yeah.
opportunities to grow and to scale. And so what I end up finding is when I talk to someone at a certain stage, they are smart, they are successful enough, they got to a certain point where they're full-time on their business, they're been able to scale it to a certain level, they bring in help on things they don't want to do, but there are still these mental barriers or bottlenecks in their business that they're kind of afraid to take the next step on. So it's kind of different for each person. It could be maybe platforms they don't want to spend the time to be on, but they know they should be on. Like maybe they should really be on Instagram and put together a short form video strategy and use ManyChat and do things to scale their business there, but they really don't want to or they're afraid to. Or it could be they really need to hand off a part of their business that they used to do, but maybe they shouldn't be doing
Yep.
anymore. So like for me, for example, that would be like, I probably shouldn't be editing my own videos
Right.
anymore, but I know how to do it. I did it for 10 years. Like, why would I want to hand this off? So it's like the things that people are used to doing, but they probably shouldn't be doing. Those are the typical levers you try to come in and
That's good.
help them with.
Yeah. And I was writing them down, and I'm usually in the marketing seat, right? Because like the work I do is mostly on marketing, but thinking through my own business, I wrote down marketing, sales, fulfillment or operations, right? Like how do you actually deliver the thing that you're going to sell, finances, and then like admin. And maybe I'm missing something in there. But if you're listening to this and you're kind of walking through that, I think as Caleb said, if you've had some level of financial success, so you've got some cash flow that's a little bit more than what you need to eat, you're going to pretty quickly like spend money on the thing you really hate. It's like, oh man, I hate my email. It's a
Yeah.
mess. Or I don't know anything about accounting. I'm going to get a bookkeeper. And so I think what you said is totally accurate. Like we're pretty good at like triaging the really bad stuff. And then there's
Yeah.
the what's left though, I think gets into this like mix where there's probably the thing with the biggest upside for you to scale or to either put a system or a person or some energy behind is probably the thing you're pretty good at but not like world class at, right? So like Caleb's great at video editing, but like there's some probably better video editors who would be less effective hourly rates than what he should be demanding of his own time. I'm good at lead generation, but does that mean I should be writing all of my own content and being the person that follows up on it and be the one that actually creates landing pages for the funnels? No, like I could be the strategic architect over that, but like someone else needs to be doing that work. And so that's going to be personal for everyone listening. Like, but it's kind of like kill your darlings, right? It's like probably the thing that you're pretty good at that you kind of like is probably the thing holding you back. Do you think that's like a fair way to summarize that?
Yeah. Typically it's something that seems scary to
Yeah.
hand off, ends up being the thing that people really need to let go of. It also tends to be things that actually don't make them money,
Yeah.
but they tend to hang on to those things for whatever reason. So you do exercises of determining, their personal hourly rate. And if they could hire someone for less than that, they should probably hand it off. But that's still kind of a mental barrier for people to unlock of whether they think like, let's say my rate is $500 an hour. Can I really go make that in an hour or not? Like I'll just do it, I'll
Yeah.
just take care of it. And, you can take it too far where you just have everyone doing everything for you and you just essentially sit around. But, Dan Martell, his book, Buy
Yeah.
Back Your Time. I don't know if
Yeah,
you're
I
familiar
am.
with that, but he's talking about that problem specifically,
Yep.
so it's like, are there things you shouldn't be doing that are taking away from what you should be doing? And I think you could take it too far, but I'd almost rather you take it too far than have to, bring it back a little bit of getting help on things that are taking time and energy away from what's really
Yep.
valuable to you.
Yeah, I think you take to the extreme where you're like, I'm not going to take out my trash despite it being full. My wife's not there because I could pay someone somewhere less than my 5 minutes to walk there. Like you got to have some like reasonableness. But if you have a true constraint in your business, like investing in something, like there's always levers to pull, right? And you fix one lever and then you over index that and another one pops up. Like it's kind of like the whack-a-mole
Yeah.
machine, right? And that's just how business is. I like to say new levels, new devils, right? Like as soon as you think you got your problem fixed, all I need is more leads. Then you get too many leads, now you got a fulfillment problem, right? And then the fulfillment, you get too much of that, and or you get that fixed, and now it's like, oh, my salesperson left, and I get that fixed, and now there's financial issues because I didn't realize the tax implications of all this money I'm making. And it's like a constantly moving thing, and so it's really helpful to have someone, like you said, a mechanic, a diagnostic person, an architect, however you want to look at that, to be able to like objectively stand back and look at your levers and be like, this is the one you should pull next, right? Or like this one's
Yeah.
way out of
Yeah.
whack, man. Like you can't see it, but I can. So just give us a little inside baseball, Caleb. So if someone's like, hey, I made 500,000 last year. I really want to make 1.5 million in a couple of years. I got an executive assistant. Like we're doing pretty good. I don't know what I don't know. Like help me. Like, is there a standard process you're going to follow them through? Or are you going to do like a 2 hour deep dive call? Are you going to fly out to their house and watch their every move? Like, how do you actually do this when it's in some ways very psychological? It sounds like.
Yeah, I'll do a bunch of research leading up to actually talking to them to like get a lay of the land essentially of what they have and what they offer. But it does come down to essentially an audit, for lack
Yeah.
of a better term, of seeing all the different parts of their business. What is your team? What are your systems? What are the apps you're using to do certain things? And then through that, you just kind of find red flags, honestly. You just find like something that's held together by duct tape when it probably shouldn't be because it's an essential part of your car that you're trying
Yeah.
to drive. When I was in high school, I drove an old Buick Park Avenue, a 1990 beige. Every part of it was beige. Outside was beige, inside was beige, everything was beige. And I was on a date and I was driving it, and the catalytic converter fell out of the bottom of my car. And it turned from like regular car volume to like go-kart level volume. And as a kid, I was like 16 or 17. I had no idea what the catalytic converter was, but I learned about it that day because it fell at the bottom of my car, like rusted off. I had to go pick it up with a golf towel that was in the trunk of my car because it was so hot, and then drove the rest of the date, like with a super
Paint
loud
the
Buick
picture here.
car.
I don't know if you were this tall then, but let's just say you were. Like, how tall are you? Yeah.
Six
So this is
four.
not a small man in this Buick LeSabre and the beige with the cattle. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. It fell off in an intersection too. Like I was turning left at a stoplight and it fell off in the middle. So I had to wait for the lights to like change, like ran out and grabbed it. Anyway, embarrassing moment of my life is now public. But I didn't know that was even a
Yeah.
part of the car. But like it was an important part to keep the car quiet and help with
Emissions. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
environment and emissions
Not
and
get a ticket. Yeah.
that as well. So have to get it fixed, especially here in California. They make you check your cars if they're old enough. So that's the kind of thing though, where it's like there's some part of your business that is probably lacked
Yeah.
attention. And that's what I like kind of dive in and figure out. And then the next step of it is like, okay, now let's fix it. What should it look like? What system should we be
Yep.
using? Let's build it out together. Let's train whoever on your team is going to do it, or find the person that's going to do it, and kind of put the pieces together. Because I feel like most businesses is kind of freehand. They're freehand drawing, they're freehand building. It's like there's this massive box of Legos from all these sets, and people just grab the pieces they want and build whatever they want. But you get to a certain point, you might want someone to give you the instructions for how to build
Yeah.
like part of something. You're probably not going to build the Millennium Falcon out of Lego without any
Yep.
instructions. You might get close to parts of it, but like, what about the inside? And yeah, so I think it's helpful to have someone that's been around doing that long enough that they can see some of the red flags and some of the things to avoid too. Because I think that that's where a lot of the more explosive or implosions happen is when you go down a rabbit hole that you don't realize
Yes.
could be wrong. So you want to have an in-person event, but you don't realize the kind of expense it is and how they don't make money for a few years, and it's really easy to have your company go belly up if you
Yep.
mismanage doing an in-person event. So there are things like that that I've just had experience and seen enough being around the block for 10,
Yep.
15 years in the creator economy that I can help people
Yeah, I
avoid.
love that, and I mean, you can hear it just in the wisdom of the types of stories you just shared and your own story, right? Like, as we're going to close out here and kind of tell people where to go to learn more from Caleb. But the other thing I think, Caleb, that maybe you undervalue in observing what you just shared is the connection part of this too, right? Like, I think with you, it's like, yes, you have enough experience and discernment to be like, I can see the bigger picture and I can talk to you and know the right questions to find the right next lever, right? It's kind of the opening question of this podcast is like, what's the right next system or right next point of emphasis? And I have to imagine, I'm going to let you answer this, which what will eventually become a question. You're not the expert at everything, and the person who's looking at this system of levers is not the expert at everything, right? Like that's the funny thing about creator businesses. We start one of these things because we're good at something, often creation, right? Like content creation. We have some kind of weird hobby, some knack for something. We don't know finances unless finances happens to be our knack, or we don't know sales unless we happen to be a sales background and that's why we created a business. So inevitably you're going to find a lever and you're not going to know like who's the person to pull the lever the right way. And maybe, Caleb, you are the person in many cases because you have a breadth of experience. But what if you're not? Like that's where I think maybe there's some value here that I want to kind of reflect back to you of like, so many people and you have the SBI community and you have, your own video production background and your wife's own, business pursuits. So how is that a thing, I guess, to make this into a question where you can maybe diagnose the problem, but you're not the right mechanic for the issue, then what?
I mean, then I try to
Yeah.
refer, whenever possible. I either go ask in the places where I have connections with people to recommend the right service provider or someone to hire full time, even, or I know the resources. I know the website or the course or the book or the person to go talk to or what have you. And that's just a big part of like I never really understood networking when I was in college and like in corporate. Like you go to a job fair, you go to I would go to events at Boeing and like I was like, why do I network with these people? Like unless I want their job or something, like it seemed weird. But I felt like attending enough conferences in the entrepreneurial and creator
Yep.
space, I just naturally grew my network. And honestly, that was where I got most of my clients was just word of mouth or reaching out to people or staying in touch or being in person with them and having a meal or having a
Yep.
drink and getting to know each other. And then they get to know and trust you. And yes, you need to have the skill set, a portfolio, or the proof behind the scenes so that when they want to hire you, you can actually do it. But it's the connection and your network that's super valuable. So that's the other piece that I feel like I can bring
Yeah,
to the table for
for
people
sure.
as
And
well.
from the seat that I'm in, as someone who sees a lot of these businesses as well, like that's actually probably the highest value. And again, that's the thing AI is not going to replace. There probably become a time where AI will read everything all parts of my business is going to tell me the right next lever to pull. But it's still, I got to have someone I know, like, and trust to come work on the lever. And I think that that's where the center of influence, this idea that you're constantly growing your network. And I just have to throw in a little tidbit because what you said, like, so true of me too. Like coming out of an engineering background, very introverted. The idea of networking, I mean, it literally was like handing out business cards and a technical conference is like, gag me. This is horrible. Like I actually don't want to know any
Yeah.
of these people. Uh, but you evolve and you realize that like there's so much power in just like being friends with people and getting to know people. And at some point you're going to help them and then they may help you. And so to make this a real quick full circle moment, last year in Boise, I showed up at that conference last minute, didn't know anyone hardly. John Meese invited me, super grateful he did. And I somehow ended up at this creator dinner, and I showed up at this restaurant. And I sat at one end of a long table, and uh, I I saw Caleb in the distance, and I saw Matt in the distance. I'm like, I kind of know those guys, Like I knew Matt was involved in SPI. I knew Caleb from Fizzle, and knew that you guys had the SwitchPod. And I was like, that's cool. And then as I'm leaving dinner from my table, I see Jay Papasan standing there, who wrote the one thing, and I'm like, that's Jay Papasan. This is so cool. And I went and shook his hand, and then so he's been on this podcast. And then I'm walking down the
Mhm.
stairs, going back to the hotel, and I see Matt and you walking ahead of me, and I'm like, I'm shooting my shot. I'm like, hey, Matt, you don't know who I am. And so we had a talk, and I think you had to run off to the hotel. So he and I kept walking and talking, and I ended up getting to text him. He came on this show, and now you're on this show. And then through you and Matt, I got to reconnect with Pat, and Pat's been on the show. And then we're all going to be out in Boise again in a couple weeks. And now we know each other, right? You consider us friends. I think we've been good resources for each other's companies. That's networking. I literally just like sat at a dinner and then saw some people I kind of knew, and I had the bravery to shake their hand. And so I think you sit in a really unique position, Caleb, just to like reflect back to you the value you provide. You know so many people, you're so well connected. You have so many skills that you can not only bring to bear of your own, but you know the right people as an advisor to bring in when someone needs that help. So that's a long way to set up. Like if someone's like, Caleb's really smart. I know he sits in a position that he could speak some wisdom into my business. Like, how do people make that happen? What's the right next step for people that want to go deeper with scaling their business and want to get your brain on it?
Yeah, the website is scalebeyondyou.com. That'll take you right to the appropriate page to kind of reach out to me and see if working with me makes the most sense. There's different levels of working together, whether it's, one-on-one, more of like a coaching advisorship type thing, or more of the, hands-on approach that we talked about, where it's, we take a half day and we find a problem and fix it kind of thing, all the way up to the kind of stuff I do with SPI of like actually being a fractional CEO of a creator business. So, this is a new chapter for me. I essentially feel like I'm retiring and like switching sports. I wouldn't equate myself to Michael Jordan, but this feels like switching from basketball to baseball. And who knows? Maybe I'll come back wearing the 4 or 5 like he did,
It's a good one.
and do video again in the future. But this feels like a shift for me of being a behind the scenes operator and helping people with businesses in this way, as opposed to a very specific service that I used to provide in the past.
Yeah, and I want people to take advantage of that. And I also want them to kind of recognize the meta moment here of, video expert, a CEO of a growing creator business, and an advisor to other creator businesses, leveraging decades of experience and of running your business and being a partner and having a physical product, and kind of full circle from all the stuff we talked about in your journey. Like that's so cool to me that you can create so much value for someone else's business simply through your lived experience and the fact that you sit in a unique seat, and that you have this unique not only skill set but unique connections into the marketplace to bring to bear for people that need the help. So Caleb, you're awesome, man. I really appreciate it. This went way longer, of course, because we had so much to talk about. But Caleb Wojcik is the man. I really appreciate you coming on, spending time with me. Looking forward to hanging out in Boise again. Go to Scale Beyond You, YOU, scalebeyondyou.com, and that will let you get a hold of Caleb, see what he's up to, what goodness he can offer you in your business. So, Caleb, thanks again, man, for being here. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and I'll see you in a couple weeks.